Thank you all for coming. I think you're in for an amazing week. We have some incredible speakers lined up. We have public programs and some wonderful discussions. I don't intend to give a talk about systems, but I do intend to talk a little bit about the conference so that you have an idea of what the conference is about, how it's organized, and what outcome goals we might have in mind at the beginning, and that I would like you all to keep in mind as we go through the week. As many people have noticed, it's a packed schedule. There's a lot of, it appears to be very diverse. Actually, these are intended to be components of a system view. And if you adopt the concept of a requisite variety, this would be a requisite variety of causes of a whole system. So I want to say a little bit about my idea in beginning this. And the first point I would like to make, I would like somebody else to make in this video. I think this captures a lot of the theme that we're going to be approaching.
This animation shows the global pattern of human land use over the last 8,000 years, a time when human populations began expanding following the origins of agriculture. The earliest areas of human land use are in Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent areas of Southwest Asia, followed by increasing areas of land use in China, India, and Europe. Watch for areas of intensive land use developing in India, especially along the Ganges River plain, and in northern China along the lower Yellow and Yangtze rivers. As time goes on, you will see areas of land use developing in South America along the Andes and in Africa, especially in the Sahel region. By classical times, land use in Europe is very intense, with up to 60% of the land under human uses. But we start to see fluctuations around this time too, with some areas abandoned corresponding with wars, famine, and other historical events that affected human populations. Continuing through the Middle Ages and Renaissance, land use in Europe and China increased greatly following the development of cities and towns. Now pay careful attention to South America. Following the first contact with Europeans around 1500, nearly 90% of the indigenous people of the Americas were killed, mainly by disease, leading to massive regrowth of natural vegetation, especially forest in the Amazon, Andes, and Mesoamerica. As we race towards modern times, we see the settlement of the Americas and Australia by Europeans spreading across the continents, and the development of the human-dominated world we have today.
So I hope you notice the sudden dominance of the planet in the last few seconds of this video, in the last few years. We are in a very unique time period, and I think we have a very unique set of skills as systems thinkers that we must, out of responsibility, apply to this global issue. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. I want you to notice that the little red circle there's a hole in the data, and it could be that area predates even Mesopotamia. It's the Indus-Saraswati basin, and it's one of the reasons that we're collaborating with India in this in a joint conference. So
this animation shows...
No, don't do that again. Okay, so what is sustainability? We have a 30-year-old concept of sustainability right now. And if you read it, it came from the Gro-Harlem-Brundtland Commission report, Our Common Future, and it's quoted by NSF today. And if you read it, it's a sustainable world is one in which human needs are met equitably without harm to the environment and without sacrificing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So a few things I want to point out about that is it's human-centric. It's policy, it's not science, right? Because it's saying sustainability is a universal good. Sustainability of what? I think as we turn policy into science, we begin to be able to develop tools to say sustainability of what, and what do we want to sustain, what do we not want to sustain. For example, someone pointed out to me that Sudan has been at war for 1,200 years. That's sustainability. But we don't necessarily want that. So we want to understand how systems sustain themselves or how they are sustained by other systems so that perhaps we can alter that. and replace it with a healthy, sustainable system. So I think when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about sustainability of healthy systems. And I do hope this advances. There we go. So I gave a talk at the Ecological Society of America where I pointed out the difference between what I call process sustainability. We're looking at fracking, we're looking at oil development, we're looking at various things, moving into a concept of systemic sustainability. And along with that, we can start to talk about the science of sustainability, which is an absolutely exploding field right now if you look in the literature. Sustainability science is a new, powerful discipline that is actually being absorbed into the mainstream. And you'll see that Friday, where they pick up the same narrative you saw in that video in a planetarium program that Josh Tewksbury put together for Future Earth. Future Earth is a new umbrella over all global change programs now. And they are very much focused on the relation between human systems and natural systems that have, up till now, been approached scientifically in a mechanistic way. We have to get beyond that. They know it. They're excited about it. They don't know how to do it. In our 60 years of conferences, we have 60 years of experience. We may not have the answers, but that's 60 years they won't have to repeat if we talk to them. So what's the conference about? System sustainability. And I think we're talking about healthy systems and whole systems. So I want to give you a sense of my idea of what I mean by whole, because we don't have definitions of these things, right? And we even argue about definitions of what a system is. So we're comfortable with the idea of whole in certain contexts. I mean, everybody knows what whole milk is, right? Would anybody be willing to write a definition of whole milk? What does it mean versus not whole milk? You know? And okay, we think it has all the stuff in it, right? It has all the fat, it has all the whatever else. It's more than that, because whole milk has a sense of including the cow, where it came from. And I would say a whole system is a system that includes both the parts, and I'm not going to say the whole, both the parts and the origin or the context, because the behaviors of the dynamics of the measurable parts plus the context of its origin and its existence, that relation is what becomes whole, in my view. So it's very much a yin-yang. Content, behavior, and context origin creating each other. This gets us out of the idea of saying that a system is a collection of things and we don't know how they're related, but they are. We can get more scientific now. We can talk about how they're related causally. And as you know, my work with Judith Rosen is in following Robert Rosen's work on modeling relations. It's the same relation. The context here is on the right. The material system is on the left. It applies to how we develop models of systems, and it applies to how systems themselves are established in nature. So I alluded to the global challenge that we have. We're pushing the boundaries. You'll hear a lot about pushing the planetary boundaries in Josh Tewksbury's talk, and also this evening, Friday evening in the planetarium program. You can see in a lot of different measures that we have occupied 50% of, we're equal to nature now. We occupy 50% of the world. You know, we're doubling CO2, we're doubling nitrogen. We've occupied 50% of the usable land surface and converted it to human use. We're approaching 50% extinction. We're now in an extinction period that the rate of extinction is equal to any in geological history. It's not on the front page of the newspaper, but it should be. So we have global challenges. Right? And we're it. And part of the narrative I discussed with Future Earth is that it's like this planet and all the planetary systems has run itself for 4.5 billion years. Now we're in charge. Right? Who has the manual? Who's been trained? Who's ready? You see? And it's like, take your kid to work day and you go and the kid sees this wonderful, incredible thing, NASA and rocket ships and everything else. And they say, oh, by the way, you're going to run this place tomorrow. So we have to admit that there's a lot we don't know, but because we are now globally dominant, we're it. And the problem isn't the boundary that we've been studying and pouring so much money into establishing how much we're pushing this boundary, the temperature, the nitrogen, all the things I mentioned. Now we have to turn attention to who's doing the pushing and how we can change the pushing. Okay, so another concept that is in the environmental studies program here that's hosting this conference on the campus is the interrelation between policy, science, and ethics. So you'll see that this week is organized around these actually 4 things you see in this diagram. Science, policy, and ethics are sort of leadership, societal leadership domains, and then what we're managing and leading is the socio-ecological system. That makes up a 4-part whole, which I'll show in a second here. The conference organization is based on that 4-part arrangement, going from vision on day 1, scientific knowledge day 2, socio-cultural knowledge on day 3, putting theory into practice on day 4, and all 4 of those rolled together in an education agenda, which Peter Tuddenham will tell us about. That's my concept of the whole. And it's the same as a participatory action research cycle or a learning cycle in Peter Senge's. It's very similar to Kinneman, which was mentioned the other day. It's very similar to DPSIR, which is the Environmental Assessment Protocol in the European Union. It's very similar to, and I could go on for the next 20 minutes, listing similar frameworks in many different disciplines. So we can't predict what you all will do this week, but there are certain outcome goals. The main one is a future of systems literacy. In that are these 4 components of the whole, just like whole milk. We have to talk about the vision. If the vision isn't right, we're not going to go there, right? If we don't believe in it, we're not going to do it. Advancing sustainability science, we have to understand the principles of what makes these systems work, how to interdict processes we don't want to continue. And we need to turn that into policy. Paul Sperry is going to be heading a policy session on Wednesday, and I hope we can produce and agree on some kind of policy statement that we can put out to the world, to other governing bodies as a press release, and say that we as a system science community believe that there are some issues that need to be addressed and that we need funding to address them. It's time for us to reach out. And if you were here last night, we had this ceremony for the 60th anniversary, which in India is a very important anniversary, transitioning from a worldly, more self-oriented life to a more responsible and spiritual life. And I think if we take that seriously, it's in keeping with reaching out now in a policy statement. It's also in keeping with the idea of reaching out to the public. And we have 3 major public events. Tonight, Gunter Pauli will be talking along with other people, and I apologize so I don't know all the other speakers in the room. It's an amazing program that the Wild Foundation has put together in partnership with ISSS. Amy Lewis has organized this. And so this is a public program. We don't know how many people were competing, unfortunately, with the Democratic National Convention, right? So I think that could affect the public attendance. I don't know if it affects so much our scientific meeting here. Wednesday, we want to address the faith perspective, too. That's part of the whole, right? We all have beliefs. I mean, what percentage of humanity is religious? We have to consider that as a factor in how the global system will evolve. And so we want to hear from that. It's a separate program. It's sponsored by the Center for Process Studies. Alex Zukatas and Andrew Schwartz from Center for Process Studies are organizing that. And that'll be a noon brown bag lunch. Those are the lunches Jennifer referred to, which you'll pick up on Wednesday and go to the UMC. And then Friday, I already mentioned the Future Earth Planetarium program.